It'd be very interesting to have also a feedback and a position from the others. And in that sense, we are very lucky to have now Tal Reshef from Israel, who's a lecturer, a specialist on global market economics, with an insight in culture, not only the culture as we see with theaters, but very much the socio-economical culture, what enables or what doesn't enable things to happen. He's advising Israeli high-tech companies. And I'd like to thank Chantal for the choice, because when we prepared for that meeting, I could perceive that Tal has a very different point of view. So it's going to be interesting to hear or to confront the views of Keith and the views of Tal. And I would be very interested to hear the Tal position versus what we have just heard, being a vigorous partisan of the system as it exists in South Korea. So I think it's fair, because objectivity means that we should always have listen one point of view and the other point of view. So Tal, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Béglé. Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett, for your deep insights of the issue. And I take the things beyond the definition of this seminar, which is the economic aspect of a possible unification of the two Koreas, of the peninsula, into the human issue, into the human view of the things, because we are talking about two groups of people that are considered as one nation, because they are both Koreans, because they have shared heritage, shared history, shared language, and quite naturally we can say, well, yes, they are the same nation, or even more than that, they share the same culture. But I am not 100% sure about it, and we see many examples of this, of people coming from the same nation and not necessarily sharing the same culture. We experienced it in my country, in Israel, after the creation of the country in 1948. People, all of them Jews, came from all around the world, from Morocco, from Germany, from Russia, from Yemen, and so on, as we usually say, from 70 people and language and country. And we found out the morning after that, yes, we share very important things that define us as one nation, as one people, but not necessarily it's the same culture. And we are still struggling to create something, a melting pot out of all this, more than 70 years afterwards. And maybe the term of melting pot should not be used. Well, this is one of the ideas that were raised. We see it in many other places, even in countries that are living together, that the people are sharing the daily life. If we see the clash between the supporters of Putin and the supporters of Navalny in these days, one may ask himself, are they representing one culture? I'm not very sure about the answer. And if you take a look at the struggle on the Capitol Hill some weeks ago in Washington, are both sides of this event Americans in the full term of the same? Are they representing the same culture? And what I am saying quite bluntly, the answer is no. We have an expectation which is not realistic. Just as one nation in one country can be formed of more than one culture, of course, the same happens when we are talking about two groups of people on two sides of the border that were not sharing the same regime in the last 70 years or so. And we could see we have an example under our hands, which is the example of unification of Germany. It's a very teaching example, because West Germany dedicated a huge fortune in order to assemble the two groups of people together. Now, after some dozens of years following those events, we have a very stabilized country, quite peaceful, related to others, very prosperous in many terms, but the economic unification really did take place, I may say, even though the ex-DDR area is still not on the same height as the West. Still, it has prospered quite nicely. But socially speaking, we see something very interesting that should be alarming the Koreans that are dealing with possible unification, which is that aggressions against immigrants in the eastern side are much more frequent than in the western side. The popularity of extreme right-wing groups in the eastern side are more widespread than in the western side. And we can explain it by the fact that those people from the ex-DDR, the Deutsche Demokratische Republik, lived for dozens of years under the regime that his policy, his way of saying things were, they are the good guys, us, they're the bad guys, okay, you know who they are, and there's the way to tackle it, usually force. Now, this paradigm is transferred into the situation of modern Germany in the 21st century, and who are the good guys? With the Germans. Who are the bad guys? Well, let's take a look. I may say the immigrants, of course. They're stealing our jobs. You know, they do not share the same culture with us. They don't usually share the same way of living. They have different religion. So, taking this paradigm, we see where to refer it and what are the means? Means of aggression. And of course, I cannot put all the East Germans, ex-East Germans in one group. Many of them have changed. Angela Merkel is a beautiful example. But still, there is a vast, big number of people that still sees it and still are different on a personal view, on the cultural view, on the social view from the majority of the West Germans. Now, let's take all those details into Korea. We have people that have been closed down in their country more than in DDR, more, and for more time. And they live in under lower conditions than in the ex-DDR. They were closed from other ideas more than in the DDR. Now, and we wish them to be integrated on this or that time in the future into South Korea with the wealth of South Korea, with the goodwills of the South Koreans, with the experience that South Korea had with defectors integrating into the country in South Korea. And this history, a part of what we learned from the East Germans, teaches us that things are very complicated. We saw people coming, defectors coming there with no social background that allows them to mingle in what they find, with no profession that fits the modern economy, with not even understanding of basic things like opportunities, like career, like bank accounting. Very basic things. A very big percentage of them do not succeed economically there. They feel like, you know, being casted out. The children in school sometimes also included. And now this is when we are integrating some hundreds of people or some tens of people on a year basis. What will happen when we do this process in front of 22 million people? Some of them coming from high ranks where they were participating in the activities of the DPRK, whatever there will be, each one with his view of the things. Integrated 22 million people, I believe, is not an economic issue. It is not an issue of financing. It is an issue of creating a possibility for them to integrate culturally, and they are not the same culture. According to my idea, of course, everybody is free to choose another way of seeing things. I see DPRK people as presenting another culture, maybe even another people. I talked quite often with people from South Korea about North Korea, and they told me, look, my grandfather had friends and even family on that side of the 38 line, but I don't share it. I don't know them. I don't have anything to do with. A part of the theoretical notion that they are Koreans, I don't have anything in common with them. And now I have to finance this huge transition of them to our country. So we have problems from both sides. And it raises some questions. I apologize, I don't have solutions to present. I have ideas. I'm not sure which of them is the best. I'm sure that doing it in one blow, tomorrow morning we are a united country, may be a disaster. because in the morning after, the North Koreans will be the animals in the natural reserve to be visited by the rich neighbors that come with their money, offering them very low-rank work. This may be disastrous for the self-esteem of the North Koreans. This will push them, like in the case of these Germans, to look for alternatives. Alternatives may be alcoholism, alternatives may be aggression, alternatives may be, and this is a very big challenge, China, because in the unification of Germany, there was no alternative. There was the West, and that's all. Be there or be square. Now there is an alternative. China is seen as an alternative. And if 22 million in the northern part of the United Korean area will be frustrated by the way that they are looked down by their southern neighbors or southern cousins, and attracted by the model beyond the Yalu River, this may cause a very, very deep disruption on the way of unification and a big problem ahead. So the cultural and personal and social issue, I suggest, is the main point to put the vision inside. And thank you for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much. Tal, I think it's very smart how you play this question of the culture. And your example of the assault on Capitol versus the people who represented the mainstream vision of Washington. Is it the same culture? Probably it's the same country, and probably they have institutions which avoid excesses. And we have seen how finally the US institutions have helped to avoid going completely crazy and banana. But those are very different ways of looking at the same reality. So I would have a follow-up question. When you talk about East Germany and West Germany, who has paid the highest price to the reunification? Is it the West Germans who injected billions and billions, a little bit à fond perdu, in the East Germany? Or is it the East Germans who lost, I like very much your word, for me it's a key word, their self-esteem, because they became maybe not a zoo in East Germany, but they had a feeling that it was a takeover of East Germany by West Germany. And hence the temptation, well, in the case of Korea, to look at a big neighbor, for example. So who is the winner? Who paid the highest price? And how can you correlate that example to the situation of North and South Korea?
As Buddha told us, happiness does not lie in achieving things. It lies in achieving our expectations. And the lower the expectations, the higher is the achievement. And I believe this is what's happening here. I would suggest even that DDR and were not, on the same way that I described some minutes earlier, were not one nation in terms of one culture. So those in West Germany that expected things to happen and not to pay a price, and each one for himself, lost. Because they lost, as far as I remember, about $2 trillion. That's a lot. That's quite a lot. Because this is their expectation. The West Germans that embraced this unification because they saw things beyond money were the winners. On the same side, on the same time, on the Eastern side, the same happened. Those Eastern Germans, they said, okay, we want to be rich, we want to be part of a prosperous country, and we expect them, because we are coming from a state capital, a country, you know, a country that finances everything and pushed forward everything. We expect the regime to finance everything, and we are going to be prosperous by their investments. I believe they were disappointment, but those in the East Germany who said, okay, we are becoming bigger Germany with our brothers on the other side of the wall. It is not only the question of prosperity, it's the question of identity, of history, of future, of freedom, many other things. I believe they were the winners. So I guess following your very intelligent questions, I may say, the answer is complex, at least by 4 groups, at least.
Thank you very much.